have your microphone muted, please. All right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Little. I'm the mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all here to the public meeting for Tuesday, September 21st at 7 o'clock, taking place at council chambers, but also virtually for this blended meeting. At this point, council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented in the package? Hearing none, will someone move adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Kern. Okay, call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. And the technology seems to be stable. It seems as though the meeting is, people are both able to hear and be heard if we want to during the course of the meeting. But can I just do a double check? Councillor Back, can you just take your microphone off and just say hello to everyone just so we can hear the levels?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay.
Mr. Gordon, that meets your needs?
Yeah, that's for testing.
Thank you very much. Great, fantastic. Okay, so tonight we have adopted the agenda for our public meeting. We have reports from council or staff. This is the draft Metro 2050 updates to the Regional Growth Strategy Public Information meeting. And it's an opportunity for us to view the draft Metro 2050 plan and also provide feedback and input into their process. And we're really excited to have Mayor Jonathan Cote from the city of New Westminster here. Great to see you, Jonathan. Look forward to seeing you in person again sometime soon, but virtual will have to do. But just wanted to extend a welcome to our council chamber.
Well, thank you. Well, really appreciate the introduction and welcome, and it's a pleasure to be joining the District of North Vancouver this evening. I hope everyone in the district has been taking care, and the council has been doing good during this strange time as we figure out how to do meetings a little bit differently. So, as an introduction, I'm Jonathan Cote, the mayor of New Westminster, but I also serve as chair of the Metro Vancouver's Regional Planning Committee, and really excited to be here to introduce a discussion of two very important long-range planning exercises that are happening in the region, Metro 2050 and Transport 2050, both really important long-range planning documents. And obviously, we're looking forward to engaging all of the member municipalities in our federation in Metro Vancouver. I would first like to acknowledge that Metro Vancouver does encompass the traditional territories of 10 First Nations, the Katzie, Kwantlen, Coquitlam, Matsui, Musqueam, Kakite, Squamish, Semiahmoo, Tawasin, and the Tsleil-Waututh. So we need to make that acknowledgement. So as I think everyone around the council table is aware, Metro Vancouver has an incredibly long history in regional planning, and that long history has really helped shape our region and allowed our region to develop the way it has over the past century. I think we can all also admit that Metro Vancouver is an incredibly beautiful part of the world to live in. I think we're all quite fortunate to be able to reside here. We're a region that is bounded by mountains, the water, the border, and although those are incredible assets, they also create incredible planning challenges, particularly in a part of the world that has seen tremendous population growth and is expected to continue to see significant population growth into the future. The work that we've been doing on Metro Vancouver 2050 has not been about rewriting the regional plan. It's about building upon the past successes we are. And I've had the opportunity to chair the regional planning committee, and I do want to acknowledge Councillor Murray, who has also served on that committee, who has been working on Metro 2050 for approximately around 3 years. And as we took on this work, I think the decision very early on in the process was, how do we build upon the successes and what's been working in the existing regional plan, and work on that. And I think we can all recognize prior emphasis such as protecting natural areas, protecting agricultural land, really cementing regional town centers that are connected by good transit are all important priorities that were important decades ago and continue to be important as we move forward. But I think we also recognize there's emerging challenges facing our region as it continues to grow. We face challenges with affordability. We face challenges with the infrastructure in our region, and all the more important reasons that we engage in this important work to do an important update of Metro 2050. It's also been an incredible opportunity to do this major refresh of the long-range planning strategy in the region at the same time that TransLink is also working on the long-range transportation strategy, Transport 2050. And I don't believe any time in our region's history that these two long-range plans have actually been done concurrently. So there's been a lot of collaboration and work between the two bodies as we have done this work. So with that, I am going to pass it off to Jerry Dobrevoni, and obviously looking forward to some really great discussion about the work and updates we're doing on Metro 2050.
Well, thank you very much, Director Cote, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present Metro 2050. My name is Jerry Dobrevoni. I'm the Commissioner and Chief Administrative Officer at Metro Vancouver. Part of the reason I'm here today is to emphasize to you how important this 80-page plan is to everything else that we do at Metro. How we plan for projected growth and land use in the region has a massive impact, for better or for worse, on our other responsibilities as local governments, including the regional utilities and services that are provided by Metro Vancouver. If we choose a sprawling development pattern, we also choose to spend more down the road on expanding and maintaining inefficient infrastructure and inefficient transportation and transit systems. Simply put, if we spread the population too thin, it has budgetary implications. We end up with miles of pipes and roads that are much more expensive to maintain. And those aren't the only costs that we have to think about. In addition to the impacts of sprawl on affordability and equity issues, there are health impacts of time spent in traffic from emissions, including greenhouse gases. Choosing compact, complete communities, on the other hand, means greener efficiencies and protecting things we value, like our industrial capacity, our sensitive natural areas, and our food-producing lands. That compact development pattern also has important resilience benefits, and these past 2 years have highlighted the importance of planning for a resilient region. For example, the challenge of COVID has taught us the essential value of protecting our conservation and recreation lands and making sure that we expand our parkland to meet the growing popularity of our parks and trails. And our experience this summer with this extreme heat, drought, and rampant wildfires demonstrate that climate action and planning for resilience cannot be delayed, which is why we're committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 and building communities that are more resilient to natural hazards and extreme weather. These are the principles that you will see shine through on every page of Metro 2050, the update to the regional growth strategy. Like Director Cote, I also want to extend my gratitude to you and your staff for the comments and input provided. They are important contributions to the drafting of Metro 2050. I know as you look through this document, you'll see that it reflects the issues you've raised and solutions you've proposed. This is your plan, and we cannot get it over the finish line without your help. I know Heather and her team really value your participation and engagement because it helps to make the final product better. We're listening, and we want to hear your input on the draft presented to you today, because together we make our region strong. Now I'll pass it over to Heather to walk through this evening's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerry. And I'm just going to share my screen if I could. Someone just confirm that that's showing up for you. Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, Your Worship and Council, for having us here this evening. I just wanted to note that the objective really for this evening is to provide an overview of the draft Metro 2050 with an aim of preparing the District of North Vancouver in providing comments on this draft. I'm going to start by providing a quick introduction on regional growth strategies and our long history that Mayor Cote spoke of visionary regional thinking as a federation of local governments. Then I'm going to touch on the scope of the update and some of the highlights in Metro 2050. And then finally, I'll review the process for providing your comments this fall and next steps. So a regional growth strategy is essentially a long-range policy document that covers any issue that the regional federation together determines needs to be approached from a regional perspective, and is defined primarily through the Local Government Act. And it requires that all official community plans across our federation be generally consistent with the regional growth strategy as a way of really ensuring that we're working together towards common goals and a sustainable future. As Mayor Cote noted, we have a long and proud history of regional planning in this region going back decades, and our current regional growth strategy is called Metro 2040, and it was signed on to by all affected local governments in July of 2011. It has served the region quite well, and that's why our board has directed us to scope the update to really build on the successes of the existing plan. And as such, the majority of Metro 2040 is porting directly into Metro 2050. However, the board has also given a strong direction to align with the update to the regional transportation strategy that you'll hear about later tonight, and apply what we've learned for 10 years of implementation, and also to respond to some of those critical challenges that are facing this region right now. So in particular, you'll see strengthened focus and emphasis on climate action, housing affordability, and social equity. This hasn't been a short process. So this kicked off about 2.5 years ago, and it included a robust engagement program that we carried out despite the challenges that were provided by the COVID-19 pandemic. Member jurisdictions in particular have been engaged at the elected official level through councils, but also at the staff levels to ensure that this update reflects your community's priorities, concerns, and perspectives. You can see some of the activities that have been undertaken, but they've included 4 public dialogues hosted in partnership with members and other subject across the region, a webinar, and public feedback form. We scoped this update around 11 themed policy reviews, so different elements of the regional growth strategy, think housing, transportation, climate action, environment, and so on. And we worked with your staff and other subject matter experts to explore A, what was working well in the regional growth strategy, B, where the gaps were, and C, how we could have some policy improvements so that this plan can better support you and your local planning and our common planning objectives. We also struck a Metro 2050 Intergovernmental Advisory Committee, and that was made up of member jurisdiction staff, local First Nations, the province, and other stakeholders that really was instrumental in helping us shape, develop, and review all of the content in Metro 2050 on a goal-by-goal basis. The draft of Metro 2050 was presented to the board, our board, Metro Vancouver board, for referral out for comment in June of this year. Copies were then circulated to all the signatories and other stakeholders, inviting you to provide comments by November 26th. What you will see in this draft is that there continue to be actions for Metro Vancouver as an agency, for member jurisdictions, and for TransLink to show how local and regional land use and transportation planning work together towards that common and desired future. Regional projections for population, housing, and employment are an important element of the regional growth strategy, but they're also a key service that regional planning provides to our members, to TransLink, to utilities, and others to help you in your capital infrastructure and community planning. I do want to emphasize that these are projections, not targets. The intent is to provide information and guidance for planners, engineers, and decision makers across the region on what growth we think you will anticipate in your community based on past trends and a whole set of assumptions about the future that include demographic shifts, immigration and migration rates, etc. This model is flexible and it changes as better data and research become available. But as you can see on this slide, we're a growing region and we expect that to grow, to continue. We expect to grow by about 35,000 people a year and reaching a population of 3.8 million by 2050. And just as by way of context, 35,000 people a year is the population of Port Moody joining our region every single year. And so we also need 500,000 houses and 500,000 jobs to be able to accommodate that growth well. The numbers that you see in Metro 2050 have been tested with your local planning staff to ensure that they fit with your local population forecasts and projections, planned capacity, and assumptions around growth. So here are the 5 goals in Metro 2050. They do reflect those long-standing regional planning principles and ensure that we as a federation can accommodate growth in a way that protects what we all value. And whether that's our food lands, our job lands, our ecologically sensitive lands, whether that's creating a region of diverse and complete communities, a strong and resilient regional economy, and ensuring that we're providing urban infrastructure like transit, sewer, and water in an efficient means. So much of the content, as I said, in Metro 2050 has been carried forward from Metro 2040, but I did want to highlight a couple of areas where some discussion may lay. So the first thing we heard from our members is that they required some clarity on where we are directing growth to this network of urban centers and to transit-oriented locations along the frequent transit network. And so we've provided new types of urban centers and FTDAs to help provide clarity on where growth is expected and where it should go. There's also stronger alignment of planned locations for growth with transit investment, and you'll hear some of that from TransLink a little bit later. We are using a tool called the Major Transit Growth Corridors in the plan. One of the things we heard from our members as well is that a great role for Metro Vancouver to do in the regional growth strategy is to set aspirational targets that we can all work towards together within the context of your local communities. And one of those targets is that 15% of new and redeveloped housing in urban centers and good transit-oriented locations be affordable rental housing. And there is a whole host of policies that are helping to address the housing challenges in this region. So encouraging transit-oriented affordable housing, increasing stock across the board, and protecting our existing non-market rental units. There's also stronger protection for industrial lands, some industrial lands, but other job lands, there's a recognition for greater flexibility, particularly near rapid transit stations. There is stronger climate action, including collective actions for all of us to take to meet our ambitious greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and to prepare for the inevitable impacts of climate change. There are 2 more targets that are environmentally focused. One is to protect 50% of land for nature. We're at about 40% in this region right now. And also to achieve 40% tree canopy cover within the urban containment boundary. And we're at about 32% right now. Our board has asked us to really be mindful of who benefits from the different policies that are in the plan and to recognize that they have different impacts on different segments of the population. So more explicit integration of equity outcomes and a stronger emphasis on building relationships with First Nations and incorporating their development plans and needs. So this process right now, this comment period, the 5 months, is happening in advance of bylaw readings, and that is on purpose. We want to have this dialogue with member jurisdictions across the region because there's still lots of time for dialogue, for change, for input into the plan. And as Jerry noted, this is your plan, and this draft was really prepared based on municipal input and guidance, including what you and your staff have told us is important for your community, and now we want to hear what you think. Again, the comments are due by council resolution by November 26th, but there's also opportunities for residents, businesses, nonprofits, and others to provide comments using a public-facing online feedback form. We've got a whole host of engagement opportunities lined up this fall, including a webinar on October 19th if you want to hear more about particular policies or engage with staff on that. So here's the timeline right now. Our board has really set an ambitious timeline wanting to get the update to the regional growth strategy adopted within this local election cycle. However, this comment period right now gives us an opportunity to assess how we're doing in terms of alignment and how close we are. So in November, December of this year, as the comments come back, we'll report back out to our board and the Regional Planning Committee on whether or not we're ready to move forward with bylaw readings early next year. And so I do just want to say thank you again for inviting us to present and to thank your staff very much who have extensively contributed their energy, their time, their expertise in helping to shape the draft and make it as effective and supportive to your community as possible. And we're looking forward to a fulsome dialogue this evening so we can really take your feedback and comments and integrate it into the next iteration and draft. So thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. McNell and Mr. Del Pavoni and Mr. Cote, Mayor Cote, for your presentation. We do have a member of the public signed up to speak tonight, and I figure I'll move over to them now and then give council an opportunity to formulate their questions. Mr. Teven, I'm going to call you down to the front desk here.
It's feedback.
Thank you. Following the protocol of normal, I will report Peter Tevan, 1900 Block Indian River Crescent, here in the District of North Vancouver. Thank you for holding this meeting, and having been involved in the local all candidates meeting, trying a hybrid last Monday, I can extend my sympathies to staff because it's not easy. I read through a portion of the materials tonight, and I'll give you, not just our council, but the others present here, kind of the perspective of a long-time citizen and resident of the District of North Vancouver. And I also have the perspective of having been born and raised in the west side of the city of Vancouver. My family goes back to 1903 in the city of Vancouver. The first thing is reading the materials. I would say that it's very confusing because the number one goal that you cite, which is compact urban areas, I immediately turn my thoughts to what are the two biggest capital projects going on. And I don't know whether this is the first biggest or the second, but the Langley SkyTrain. It seems to me that where we're spending our money is sprawl. What is it about compact urban areas where we're building a SkyTrain that's trying to send people 40 kilometers? Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me as a system. I really wish that we would invite our friends from Metro over. Take a drive. I'll take you. I'm double vaccinated. I'll drive you around the neighborhoods of North Vancouver and let you know what the effect of the relationship and the policies of Metro Vancouver have been on the district. Because these days, we have more traffic coming to the North Shore on a Saturday and Sunday morning to use our parks than go the other way to work during a busy commute day. We have people parking illegally, unsafely, driving unsafely. They're urinating on people's lawns because you've densified Burnaby and Vancouver to such an extent that they all flee those areas and come to our woodland areas to recreate on the weekends. And it is making our lives very, very, very difficult. At the same time, I look at things like your utility rates, and they're growing exponentially and irresponsibly out of control. The first thing I can say with regard to the goal to grow Vancouver by 1 million people is that there are other areas of Canada and British Columbia that would welcome increased population. Vancouver is pretty dense now. We say that we need 500,000 more homes, but one of the biggest problems that government has been attending to in the last few years is purchased but empty homes. Doesn't seem to fit, how those two things go together. We need to build more homes so they can be empty? What? It doesn't make sense. Our council here will know I've given real world examples in the past of how increased density actually leads to less affordability. It's actually medium density that is affordable. 3 to 4 story walk up townhomes, things like that. These towers are ever increasingly more expensive. And then as a citizen and user of Metro Vancouver, the other thing I want to tell you is that the combined policies, particularly of things like the City of Vancouver, where the City of Vancouver is doing everything you can to limit access to services within the City of Vancouver, and basically making it absolutely impossible. And the next step, I think, being looked at is so-called mobility pricing, which is entirely designed to make us unmobile. You know, when you talk about social equity has to include access to government services. Now, here we sit at this current point in this pandemic with single vehicle or private vehicle use right back where it started. Bicycle use for recreation is up, but as transportation, doesn't seem that it is. And transit, public transit, is at 50%. And the announcement out of TransLink today is not that transit will be more safe from the point of view of virus, but it will be air conditioned for comfort, which is not exactly what's on people's minds. So I'm going to ask you this question because I'm a user of this government facility. I live at the base of Mount Seymour, and at least several times a year I need to go to the BC Cancer Agency. Does Metro Vancouver and TransLink really think that people going to the Cancer Agency should be riding in shared spaces on public transit? Social equity has to include those people. How are you going to maintain access? You know, we have all these thoughts about, you know, what needs to happen for development, and mostly those thoughts seem to center around however it is all of you citizens were living before, that needs to stop. And so what we do is we put an urgent care center on the North Shore in the least accessible place on the North Shore, the least. And then we put it 3 floors up so that you can't go there during a pandemic because you have to ride an elevator. We put in policies, you know, and really what this all comes down to is the Iron Workers Bridge. You know, I laughed when I saw the first screen, and first thing you have when you talk about Metro 2050 is a picture of a bridge that's likely to be falling down by then, because we haven't had a single lane of transportation infrastructure increased in the last 60 years on the North Shore. Yet we're spending money to take people out further to Langley and further. You know, all I can say, and I'll wrap up, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And we in the District of North Vancouver do not feel like if this is a marriage, District of North Vancouver and Metro Vancouver, as a citizen, I'm here to tell you with sadness, we have irreconcilable differences. It's not working. And we're certainly not feeling the love. Thank you.
Mr. Teevan. Ms. McNell, do you have any response from Metro staff? Thank you, Mr. Teevan. Ms. McNell, do you have any response from Metro staff?
Thanks so much, Mayor Little. Well, I'm calling in today from Lloyd Avenue, District of North Vancouver as well, just so you're aware. I'm a happy resident of your municipality. You know, one of the things that there is maybe some confusion about is that the compact urban region really means that our land's within an urban containment boundary. And the urban containment boundary does include the SkyTrain line areas out to Langley. And we're very fortunate in this region that our urban containment boundary actually aligns very strongly with the agricultural land reserve. But we have a target in the plan to achieve 98% of our growth within that urban containment boundary. And over the last 10 years, we've hit that. And that's very unique in North America. If you look to Toronto, about 50% of their growth is through expansion and 50% is within their existing urban areas. And in Calgary, it's even a different story. About 70% is through expansion. And so we actually are doing an incredibly good job of maintaining growth within an urban containment boundary. We also have targets in the plan right now to make sure that we're directing as much housing and employment growth to urban centers and good frequent transit development areas. And we've hit all of our targets in that in the last 10 years as well. But it does mean we're still growing. And the growing that we are doing is somewhat of a reflection of our immigration policies. And to a large degree, over 80% of the growth to this region is due to immigration. And that's a good thing because we need that kind of growth around jobs and a resilient economy. So just some notes with regards to where growth is going. Appreciate your comments very much with regards to recreational uses of parks on the North Shore, and that coming from around the region. We're very aware and live to the pressures on the North Shore for those places. And also just with regards to the challenges of balancing capital infrastructure costs when we have this growing region. And I don't know if Jerry wants to add to that piece at all.
I can just assure you that we're keenly aware of increasing costs and the pressures of that. Right now, all of the Metro services are on the order of about $580 per household, and we know that that there's a lot of stresses and pressures. I would say that offers good value. 1,000 liters of drinking water is about 90 cents. And when we look, across North America at competitiveness, it is you receive good value. But that said, I understand that there's cost pressures all across the region, and through our budget process, we're keenly aware of those. We're at a stage now where we're building an awful lot of new capital infrastructure. Building 3 new sewage treatment plants, as you're well aware, one of them on the North Shore. Major expansion and rehabilitation of a 4th one, and boring 2 very large water tunnels right now, one of them right next to the Ironworkers Bridge that's 21 feet in diameter. And so keenly aware of those costs, and we've been deferring. We deferred about $400 million out of our 5-year budget window because we recognize we can't do it all at once. So anyways, I just wanted to stress to the council and to your residents that that cost pressures are felt by all of us, and in our budget process, which is in November, our board will look at our budget for next year in October, and that'll be a really important part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Councillor Bond, and then I'll have some comments, and then I think it's probably prudent to get the TransLink presentation out, because I think what you're going to find, including Mr. Teevan's comments, is the inextricable link between transportation and housing policies. And so I'm going to go to Councillor Bond, and then we're going to get the TransLink presentation through. Councillor Bond?
Actually, Mayor, I think I'd rather see the TransLink presentation as well before making my comments, if that's okay with you.
Totally fine. Yeah, and just as a segue to that presentation, I mean, the challenges for the District of North Vancouver, I think Mr. Teevan framed it fairly well, is that we haven't had an infrastructure increase to the North Shore largely since 1968. We've obviously had changes in frequency of the C-bus service, but we have growing demands on our transportation infrastructure. And it definitely has a direct correlation to both affordability on the North Shore, but also the millstone around the neck of the economy on the North Shore when we can't get goods and services to and from the North Shore. And so it is affecting both our ability to get around at the transportation lines, but also our ability to unlock our business community and to be able to fully participate with the South Shore economy of the larger municipalities. But so at this point, I'm going to go to, I believe, Caitlin from TransLink, and you have about a 15-minute presentation, I believe.
Yes, thank you so much. I will pull up my presentation now. Yes, thank you so much. My name is Caitlin Cooper. I'm the project manager for the Regional Transportation Strategy, or Transport 2050. And I'm here today to give you an overview of where we are in the process of developing that strategy, and the linkage with the Metro 2050 process as well. I do want to be very upfront, though, that we are a little bit ahead of our formal engagement period, which is going to launch in October. So I am a little limited in what I can say to you tonight. But I do encourage you to work with your staff. We have been working closely with municipal staff as well as the Mayor's Council in developing this strategy. And we will have 3 elected official workshops through the engagement period that you should have received invitations to or will be receiving shortly. But I know everybody is really keen to find out more about what's in the strategy, and that is definitely coming. but I just want to give you an overview of that process. I'm sure many of you know what Transport 2050 is, but just to give you a short recap, TransLink is required to produce a 30-year look-ahead strategy every 5 years. It's part of our legislation. And it's to look at all of the regional transportation within Metro Vancouver. And so that means roads, goods movement, walking, cycling, and transit. We do not look at international rail, international air, and international marine, though we do work with our partners at the port and the federal government and the provincial government on those elements. It's a shared strategy for the region. So this is not a TransLink only strategy. We have been working so very closely with all of the municipalities in Metro Vancouver through, at the staff level, the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee, RTAC, as well as for this particular program, we've been working with the Regional Planning Advisory Committee through the Metro Vancouver process, the RPAC. And so we've had really great engagement through that group on a monthly basis. And we've also been working very closely with the Mayor's Council through both committee and the General Mayor's Council. So we are building on a strong history in this region, as Heather pointed out earlier, of regional planning. And so this strategy is really building on that platform. So we are delivering this strategy in 3 phases. Phase 1, we launched in 2019. It was the longest and biggest engagement in TransLink's history. It was 5 months long, and we really were wanting to find out people's values and vision and ideas for the future. So it was a really great opportunity to hear what was important to people. We took a lot of that feedback back and did a lot of analysis. We worked closely with Metro Vancouver and the province to develop some specific pieces that went along with that, such as the scenario planning report and social equity report and regional resilience report. And so that's been a really great foundation as well. We were, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to pause our phase 2 engagement period a little bit, but we were out earlier this year in April and May, talking about what our proposed goals were in response to those values that we heard from people, as well as 3 transformative actions that we felt we needed public feedback on before we could put them into the draft strategy fully. And now we're getting ready for phase 3 engagement, which will be on the full draft strategy. And we're planning to launch that in October. So just to give you a recap of some of the things that we heard in the phase 1 engagement. So really building off of what Heather was presenting on as well, that people value access to natural areas and parks in this region, access to shops and amenities. So that compact community element is really important for our plan as well. And the proximity to transit. Some of the concerns, I'm sure these are no surprise to anyone in this meeting, that housing affordability was #1 concern, road congestion, and climate change. Those have been our top 3 concerns in this region for at least 15, 20 years. And sometimes they change their order and priority, but we know that we need to make progress on those. And then the priorities that people told us for the next 30 years was transit expansion and improvement, transportation options that are timely and convenient. So really recognizing that, you know, if you don't have an option other than their car, then how can we do that better that's timely and convenient? And a transport system that's cost effective and efficient. Phase 2, we went out with the draft goals, as I said. So we have 5 draft goals and 3 transformative actions, and we've received a lot of really good feedback, particularly around the major transit network, as Heather was also mentioning. The 5 goals that we went out with and that we will be bringing forward in the draft strategy as well are convenient choices, reliable choices, affordable choices, safe and comfortable choices, and carbon-free choices. So these are really recognizing that the convenient choices are really recognizing that we need universally accessible choices that are abundant for many people. So that doesn't mean just having one more option available to you, but several options available to you, as many people in the region as possible. So better transit service, better walking, better cycling facilities, and maybe more shared services in the future. For reliable choices, that's not just reliable transit, it's also reliable roads and goods movement. So how can we improve our transportation system as a whole? Affordable choices. So we are proposing through this strategy that we need to be taking housing and transportation costs into account because those are the two biggest expenditures that households face. And so how can we bring those together and make decisions, recognizing that housing and transportation costs go hand in hand? Safe and comfortable choices. So this is recognizing that not everybody experiences the public realm equally. We all have different experiences, and we need to make people feel comfortable moving around in our public spaces. And then carbon-free choices. We recognize that not everybody can afford to buy an electric vehicle. So how can we make it easier for people to make a choice that is carbon-free? So more walking, more cycling, and more transit services. So the three transformative actions that we were out talking to the public in phase 2 were people first, streets that invite walking, biking, and rolling. So recognizing that a lot of municipalities have transformed some of their streets during the pandemic for more walking and cycling, for exercise, but also for socialization. And how can we build on that trend that has been happening? Action 2 was fast and frequent rapid transit. That's a competitive choice for most longer trips. So we were taking out 2 major transit or rapid transit network options to the public to get their feedback on some of the attributes associated with them. And we took that feedback and have worked with all of the mayors as well as the municipal staff on developing a preferred network for the future. And so we will be bringing that forward in October. And then action 3 was automated vehicles that provide convenient access to car trips without adding to congestion. So this is recognizing that the technology is coming, but we have an opportunity in this region to really make some decisions on how we want to use that technology to achieve the objectives that we want. So just to recap that we will be coming out in October on phase 3, and it will include a survey. So the public will have an opportunity to give feedback on a quick survey. If they don't have a lot of time to read a 100-page long document, we'll have an executive summary and 1 or 2 questions that they can give feedback, or they can go more detailed into the strategy itself. We will also be having stakeholder and public workshops. And as I mentioned, we will be having 3 elected official meetings, and they are October 14th, October 16th, and October 21st. So I believe those invitations went out today, but please do feel free to reach out to us if you did not receive those invitations. And that concludes my presentation for today.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We do appreciate it. It's obviously these are all lofty goals to take us from the current situation that we're in. And my view on the North Shore is that we're in a deficit position in terms of major infrastructure already. We have probably some of the longest daily commuting lineups in the country to and from the North Shore. We're routinely 10-kilometer long lineup northbound in the morning to get to the North Shore, and routinely 6 to 8 kilometers in lineup to head off the North Shore. And that's not even when we experience a car collision or something else that obstructs the traffic. And so it is demand, and it is closely related to both the demand for service level positions on the North Shore, jobs on the North Shore, a significant portion of that being some of the active construction projects going on, but also just the demand for services as we age in the North Shore. We have a lot of people traveling to our space. And then, as pointed out earlier, we have this new rapidly increasing demand for the recreational spaces on the North Shore. And I guess it's just a recognition that as people build smaller and smaller spaces to live in, So you're talking about, I think City of Vancouver has some 500 square foot units with some 250 square foot lock-off units in them, that people are going to go to destination recreation when they need a break from their space. And so they're going to take their entire Saturday and they're going to go somewhere for the day. Whereas, the traditional single family house, quite often they're doing yard work or other things within their own immediate neighborhood. Here we have people commuting great distances for access to nature, as I believe that the way it's framed in the TransLink plan. And it's gotten to the point that I believe it was a weekend at the beginning, early stages of COVID. Councillor Murray, you're on the Parks Committee, but I believe it was 80,000 visitors in a 2-day period to the Lynn Headwaters Park that really made us aware that COVID was going to shift a lot of behavior onto these recreational spaces, and it hasn't looked back. Our parks are dominated by destination recreation visitors, and we want people to get out, we want people to get active, but we're really being overwhelmed on the North Shore, where, and I know some of the other municipalities too. I know Mayor Cote, our friend from Belcarra there, and Anmore as well, they have a situation where they have to shut off access to their main road at about 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday because there's so many people flooding into that area from the greater region, and it's just overwhelming the local infrastructure. And I guess so that would be the question that I'd like to throw to you is, what do you see as being the regional responsibility to respond to regional demand for our local spaces and assets? We as a municipality have a very long-standing commitment to securing, as Metro Vancouver in their plan pointed out, both tree canopy coverage, protected nature spaces, all of the desirable spaces that people want for outdoor areas. We've been protecting them, and yet the result is that other municipalities that are building at higher densities and not providing the park space and not providing options for people for outdoor recreation, they just simply come over and demand the space from our area. It's a regional demand. It requires a regional solution, in my view. And I guess I see Ms. McNell on there as well, but I think I'm going to go to TransLink first and just say, what do you see as being the regional responsibility to respond to that type of demand?
Thanks so much for that question. I totally understand the situation because I am one of those Vancouverites trying to get to the North Shore Mountains. It's a wonderful place to go. It's a beautiful asset that we have in this region. And I do think that there is a role to play for better transit access to a lot of these recreation facilities so that people do have better access to green spaces, and that we can reduce the amount of vehicles that are trying to get to those spaces. I also recognize that there's a need for, bike storage or bringing your bike along with you and other things. And so those are considerations as well. But we are also constantly trying to balance the need of other regional priorities as well when we're making service decisions. And I think this will be a critical element of the Mayor's Council going forward, is how can we improve services to some of these recreation facilities while also bringing improved services to the social equity elements across the region as well. So it's always a balancing act.
I have another question for Metro Vancouver, but I'm going to let Councillor Murray jump in first. Councillor Murray, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Yeah, it was into the regional park system during the 2020 year. It was an additional $4.5 million into the regional park system. There was a 17% increase in Lynn Headwaters, close to 400,000 people within that year visiting that park. And, parks and regional planning understand, when you're coming from the southern part of the Second Narrows and you're heading over because you want to experience green space, the easiest spot to go is into the district. Driving another 20-30 minutes to West Vancouver, for instance, is not quite as convenient and it's not quite as accessible. And so we've got a staff group working within parks to look at the entire area across the North Shore and look at how we can provide more accessibility with a little bit more equity across the board for the municipalities, because it is very challenging. You know, I was in a line coming here, heading west today, the long snake line, and we haven't completed the Mountain Highway interchange project quite yet. So not all the lanes are fully opened, but it's a challenge every day. Just to TransLink, you talked about public workshops that are coming October 14th, 16th, and 21st, and how can our citizens take part in those? I know that Metro Vancouver is also working on, or they're actually offering public workshops as well to allow our citizens to come in to our hall or to an appropriate venue where we can social distance, but also where they can connect with Metro Vancouver staff to ask questions and engage and have some conversations about different challenges. And I'm wondering, Mayor Little, if we could work with staff, Metro Vancouver and TransLink, to maybe suss out a time where we could have both, because these are obviously two integral plans. But if we could have TransLink and Metro Vancouver sometime in October to come over to the North Shore, to the district, and we could have a public open house that we could advertise widely and get as many residents as we can engaged in this discussion and in these papers, because it's a lot of really great work. There's a lot of implications, there's a lot of challenges, and you know, it helps the two bodies you know, gauge support and new ideas that can also be brought forward by individuals in regards to some solutions. So that's one question. So TransLink, where are these 14th, 16th, and 21st?
Sorry, just to clarify that those are elected officials workshops that you will have received specific invitations to. We will be having public online workshops is what we were planning. Information on those will be released when we launch the public engagement period, but they typically are in the middle towards the end of the engagement period so that people have the notification and then they can plan to attend the workshops. I can definitely take it back to the team to think about maybe, I think you were saying an in-person open house. We haven't been planning in-person events yet, but I can definitely take that back.
Ms. McNeil, how are we doing the public workshops with Metro? I know that the City of North Vancouver, for instance, is hosting one next week, I think.
Yes, these are all virtual open houses, to be honest, and where we're advertising with municipal staff in a number of locations for registration through those. That has been the desire of members to date. We're happy to organize one for District of North Van as well. And if we can coordinate with TransLink, we're happy to do that. So we have a set of panels, we have staff ready to answer questions, but we are asking for registration for a virtual open house.
It'd be nice if we could get back to that place where we could actually have people face to face, and I look forward to that day. But I think, you know, at the very least, we need a public, a virtual, something that we really advertise well, and to talk about the congestion on the bridge, talk about, you know, the issues around density and affordability. We really do need to have that. And we've had a number of open houses, or not open houses, but we've had a number of Zoom meetings with different community associations that have gone very well, offered an opportunity for people to ask questions virtually and to really engage on issues. I think if we brought, you know, up congestion and affordability on the North Shore and advertised it really well, we'd get a lot of people registering for those events. So I hope we can find a time to look at that. I'll just wait until others speak, and then maybe I'll come back for a couple of comments.
You know, so the comment I was going to come back to is, you know, the regional growth strategy was really originally a planning exercise about figuring out balance, how you can have bidirectional travel, living close, relatively close, nodal development that could make it so that people aren't necessarily traversing the whole region just to get to suitable employment versus or suitable housing. Move the housing to where the people are rather than the people to where the housing is. You know, The problem that I see is that there are competing interests at the Metro table that have no desire for that vision. Just as an example, and I know this will be a little bit controversial, but the city of Vancouver has millions of square feet of commercial development on their books for the downtown peninsula. And it's not going to be met by local traffic and local demand. It's going to be met by people commuting 50 kilometers from the center of Langley on the new Surrey SkyTrain line all the way down to downtown Vancouver. So it's a problem that's actually exacerbating the challenges that the regional growth strategy was actually supposed to help us address. Another example is we still have some ambitious goals from some of the Northeast regional communities, Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, Mission, on growth. And while those areas do have a significant employment base out in those areas, the nature of the growth is going to far outstrip the local jobs that they have. And so again, they're going to be requiring people to commute interregionally in order to be able to go to those spaces. We used to call it sprawl. Now we don't touch that term with a 10-foot pole because it's a member municipality. But the reality is our community is 10 kilometers away from the biggest employment center in the province of BC. And we have worse transportation options than communities that are going to be 50 kilometers away from the biggest employment zone in BC. And that's a big problem. So I guess my question to Metro, Ms. McNell, is where's the teeth in the plan? How do we use the plan to go to municipalities that are acting contrary to the goals and objectives of the plan, and use our corporate regional influence in order to be able to say, look, you need to cool your jets. We can't be transporting people all over the region to come and work in this area, so you need to put a pause on your commercial square footage increase. You need to focus on residential square footage increase in your community. And over in that other area, you need to put your residential on pause because you're basically creating sprawl. So where's the teeth in the plan?
Thanks so much for the question. And I might ask Caitlin to speak to trip origin and destination locations across the region a little bit, if I can. But I think that the very short answer is this is not a regulatory plan. And this is a collaborative vision that our member jurisdictions together set a course for where they'd like to head in a way that reflects their values. I would say that what we're hearing from a number of members is they're really struggling around employment generation and job generation and office space generation within their communities because they share the goal of wanting to have people live and work closer. I would also note, though, that our office development that's happening in the city of Vancouver, the vast bulk of that, the competition for that kind of office space is not other parts and other centers in our region. It is other major locations like Calgary, Portland, LA, San Francisco. And so we really have to look at the kinds of jobs that are being created, both in downtown Vancouver, but across the region, and how we can incentivize those to centers across the region.
Okay. All right, next speaker I have is Councillor Kern.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, everyone. Just a few comments. I wanted to draw attention to the social equity lens, which I think has really improved from where it started. And I would encourage everyone to actually look at the social equity and regional growth report that Metro did. I think that I really appreciated that it had more information. I think there's a lot of concern that social equity is going to be a checkbox, and how are we actually implementing that? And then how importantly are we actually measuring progress? Because ultimately it's about improving lives. So how are we improving people's lives who have been historically excluded from the decision-making process, et cetera. So I think that's a big step forward as we're all learning on this. We're doing the same thing. And I would imagine throughout Metro, many municipalities are embarking on that journey with open hearts and open minds. And So I did appreciate that, and I just wanted to comment on that. I wonder if you could comment on, there's always been challenges with the format of Metro in a colonial system where Indigenous nations that are not treaty nations could not participate in Metro decision making and conversations. And so I appreciated that there was more of a lens being used, or a value shift of including Indigenous communities. And I wondered if you could speak to that on is anything changing in terms of policy around that, so it's a more formal agreement or understanding, or is it still very ad hoc?
Thank you for that question through the chair. Metro Vancouver as an organization is committed to reconciliation, and we're doing a lot of work with the 10 nations that are present in the region. Right now, I know that the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Josie Osborne, and her staff are looking at legislative changes around membership at the Regional District Board table, and we're waiting to see when and what those changes will be. And I also know that several of the regional districts on the island have invited First Nations to their committee table, and so some of their standing committees include members of the local nations, and so we're looking at that option as well. So I can assure you that conversations and partnerships are going on, certainly with all of our work with the nations, but we're also looking at the governance issue. Part of that will be through legislative changes from the province, and part of that will be within our control as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's been clear, we've heard clearly from the nations that they want to be at the table, and so we're looking at how to do that.
Yeah, and I think as legislation, as you mentioned, DRIPA and other things come into effect, I think that will be a shift for all of us that I certainly welcome and look forward to. I wondered if you could speak about Metro's in a unique position in that the province has given the regional district ability to regulate air quality. And I wondered how you could speak to that in relation to our greenhouse gas emissions. And because we have very necessary rapid carbon pollution reduction targets that the regional body has agreed to, and many local governments. I'm not sure, I haven't done the current jurisdictional scan of who's done what in Metro. But if we're aligning with science, we're looking at reducing our emissions by half in the next 9 years, and then getting to zero carbon in by 2050. If not, I would like that to be far, far sooner, but we'll leave it at that. And I just wondered if, in terms of regulation, if you could talk about what ability Metro has that is unique as a regional body, because I understand, Heather, you were talking about how this is an aspirational document, but that's more of a regulatory piece. So in terms of emission reductions, what role does Metro, what power, I guess, does Metro have, and what role do you see as Metro as we all work to reduce our emissions?
Great. Well, thank you. I can maybe start, and then Heather can carry on. So you're quite right, is that Metro Vancouver is the regulator around air quality for the region, and both for contaminants. You asked about our goals, and yes, they are based on, consistent with those international goals, 2030 and 2050. And yes, we would like to achieve them earlier. We know that we do have to do more, and we have to do it faster. I should note that we as an organization corporately now are carbon neutral. We need to maintain that as we go forward, and we're working on a community GHG reduction and industry. We do, through regulation, have licensing that we grant to different industry and operations in the region, and both for contaminants and also looking at GHG emissions. And so we do have some tools available to us in terms of how we can regulate and how we can charge, and that's something we're looking to bring forward. I'm hopeful as early as this budget cycle to look at ways to provide pricing incentives that will, reduce GHGs and contaminants. and also make that more of a cost recovery area because it is being subsidized somewhat right now by the taxpayer because the fines and the fees are not covering the cost of enforcement. We find that most of our enforcement is around odor. We get lots and lots of complaints, odor complaints, and yet that's where we have some of the weakest regulatory piece. So we want to put that in balance.
If I could just add to that from a growth strategy perspective as well, in response, you know, there is still a legal framework around the regional growth strategy. So Climate 2050 was adopted by Metro 2050, and it set out kind of regional targets for GHG emission reduction and carbon neutrality. But by embedding that in the regional growth strategy, there are some requirements. Member jurisdictions now have to show in their regional context statements what actions they're taking towards meeting those targets. So there are some ability for us this time around to not just have the targets, but require certain actions. But it would be done at a higher level policy level. So it would show how your OCP, zoning bylaw, et cetera, are helping to achieve those GHG emission reduction targets.
Thank you. So I just had two more questions and then I'll pass it off to a colleague. I didn't see anything, and this is more of just a comment about like circular economy, because I think we talk a lot about jobs and but we don't talk about you know, what types of jobs does the 21st century really need in order to live within ecological limits, to improve social equity, to improve health, all of that. So I think that is something that needs to be a regional approach for sure. And just coming back from UBCM, there was a lot of support among electeds to have the province adopt a circular economic strategy. And I know that the Metro has been working on that as well, but just didn't see that direct connection. So I wondered if that could maybe be highlighted a little bit more closely. Local energy is something that we're always working on. What's the future of energy, community-owned energy? And the health piece, I appreciated that was brought up. I think the type of transformation that's required is so profound that it can be overwhelming, but I feel like we have the potential as a region to just surprise ourselves and to really, it has to be something that we do together. But the heat dome and other things that have happened have highlighted social inequity and how that has deadly impacts for people's health, but also just how important it is as we get into more acute climate change events, that there's places for people to go. And Mayor Cote, I think one of your colleagues spoke very passionately about some of the direct impacts in your community. So I think that was moved a lot of us to be thinking more about keeping people safe in what's coming, recognizing that it's not the new normal, it's actually just going to get a lot worse until we make big, bold moves. And the last thing, I just wondered if there was any information about, I know there's trip diaries, et cetera, that are usually quite outdated. So I think the last one I see is like 2017. But you know, we're increasing as a region in terms of automobile ownership, and we need to drastically change the way we move. But I really liked the presentation from TransLink in terms of the values, starting with that, like what kind of lives do we want everyone to be able to have, and then looking at how do we achieve them, and then the indicators. Like, I think that piece is always missing in government. It's like, how are we doing? Like, we thought this was going to work. Is it working? I appreciated that. You know, the frequent transit networks, we all acknowledged, you know, land values went up, it displaced people, like it wasn't the outcomes that we had anticipated. So having better indicators of that, I think, is really important. And then the last piece, as there's a huge shift, certainly in North America, towards looking at land use in terms of single family zoning, and California, big moves there. I just wondered if Metro has stats about the amount of land in the Metro region that is devoted to single family zoning. And although this is an aspirational document, are you going there? Are you talking about it? Like, what's the conversation in the region about that?
Thanks for the question, and through you, Mayor Little. Just with regards to the social equity, if I could, I just want to plug that TransLink was a great partner on that study, that when we looked at the social equity implications for growth management, and part of what came out of that was a set of 49 indicators for us to do better at measuring the social equity outcomes of both of these plans. And we're continuing to do work with TransLink on developing a tool that will help us benchmark and analyze the policies that we have with regards to equity outcomes. So just to hit that one. And then with regards to single family zoning, yes, we have data that talks about, how much of our land is in single family at this point versus multi versus townhouse, et cetera. We do have some work that looks at how much capacity we have, and a lot of that capacity is in single family zoned areas. And we are doing some research right now with regards to transition from that over time. If we are to keep our urban containment boundary and we are directing to centers, there are some challenges in it will shift. We're seeing that it'll shift down to about 18 to 20% of our housing will be in single family format by the time 2050 holds around.
Yeah, and sorry, one last thing is the mode, because I think that I love data, and I do think the mode shift, I know the TransLink trip diary is quite out of date, but something that we're working on locally is to be able to map our goals with climate to mode shift and to housing form and all of that, just so that you can really look and say, like, we're going to do our very best based on science and evidence-based decision making to get to this vision that we all have. And so I would say that that's something that there can never be too much. Well, there can be, that's true. There can definitely be too much, but I think that would be really helpful to be able to see what is the mode shift required to meet the climate targets, so that we really have a better idea of, like, if you're going from 70% of metro trips are by car, we need to get that to 30%, and then what does that mean for the improvements in the other ways to move. I really appreciated the idea of it's not just one way, it's multiple different ways to move around. And so this is going to be hard, this change that's needed. I just want to acknowledge that. But I think there's a lot of great people working on it, and it's going to take us all working together in an unprecedented way to leave something better than what's there. So thanks for all your work, and I'll shut up now.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Kern. And I'm going to go to Councillor Bond in just a moment, but just want to remind members of the public that if you're attending the meeting virtually, you can put up your virtual hand and we'll incorporate you into the meeting. Or members of the public that are here and present in person, just indicate that you'd like an opportunity to speak, and we'll create one for you. But at this point, I'm going to go to Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Mayor Little. And I think my question is a bit of a follow-up on the points that Councillor Kern was making. And, recognizing that Metro 2040 was a good foundation, and it's similar to the OCP process that we're going through right now in the district. We did our OCP in 2011, and we're doing a review, an implementation review right now. But still recognizing that a lot of those goals 10 years ago are the same goals and similar goals that we have today. But Councillor Kern mentioned two things I think that have societally had a drastic shift in the past 10 years, and those are that of social equity and of climate change, and how we address those monumental shifts in a plan that sounds like it's a port, just mostly a port from a 10-year-old plan. I think maybe some more emphasis from Metro and TransLink on how do we meet that challenge of those drastic shifts, and both of the scale and the speed that's needed to address those challenges. And that might be in the more detailed plan, or there might be more detailed actions that come out of the plan that lead to those shifts. But I think that's something that's kind of crucial from my perspective to hear from Metro and from TransLink. One point in addition to that is, I think, with we talk about welcoming more people to the region and how many more people we're going to welcome, and where more people are going to live, or at least where we're going to create more housing, because people within the region might move to those new houses that are in frequent transit, and people immigrating from other parts of the world or from across the country might move to the more car dependent areas in our region. I think one focus that we also need to think of is all those parts of our region that are existing, that exist as car dependent, that are lower amenity, and all the people that live in those housing units there. How do we bring those people and the people that either live there now or will live there in the future, how do we bring them along in this process, as well as we try and eliminate emissions and bring a more just and equitable face to our region? So like Councillor Kern said, definitely a very challenging time, and a lot of bold moves that need to be made. So I'm looking forward to reading the draft and the final report in more detail.
Through the chair, if I might respond. I mean, it's been excellent discussion, and really big topics, and I just wanted to say that Metro 2050 and Transport 2050, while they're two really important broad plans, there's still a lot of other initiatives in both of our organizations. So we have a climate action plan, we have an air quality plan. Those are embedded in and part of this, but there's also very specific work. Also with our utility development, I mean, the new wastewater treatment plant on the North Shore will take heat out of the liquid waste and use it for the Lonsdale District Energy. I'm just touching on the circular economy issues that were raised. Our regional prosperity initiative is looking at how we transition our economies and our jobs, and in particular how we provide well-paying jobs in an area that's really struggling with affordability. It's not a matter of just adding more minimum wage jobs to the region. That doesn't solve us. That doesn't position us for the future. So looking at our waste and how we use our waste as a resource, our sewer system has enough heat in it to heat 800 high-rise towers, reduce 275,000 tons of GHGs every year. And so we're looking at how do we take all that heat out of the system and use it. So I just wanted to assure you, in addition to all the work and the planning that we're talking about today in 2050, we also have these same goals and values that you've been describing that guide us corporately in all of our work.
And if I may as well, the document is 10 years old, but it's a living document, and it has been amended many times to reflect innovation and so on. And one of the big sections that's been added and beefed up in Metro 2050 this time is around adaptation, because the 2011 plan was quite silent on it. And so there are requests of member jurisdictions to minimize risks, ensuring that they have heat and air quality response plans, seismic retrofit policies, floodproofing policies, and so on. It's asking them to discourage new development in current and future hazard areas. So there's definitely strong statements in there requesting that of members. And it also has big actions for Metro around support with data and research and best practices to support resilience to the impacts of climate change and natural hazards, in particular around planning and development. So a lot of those actions are there, but we would look forward to your feedback if there are ways that they could be improved, for sure.
Thank you. I have Catherine Fagerland. Can you hear me? Catherine Fagerland, can you hear me?
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. There you
go. Good. I'm trying to use my headset.
Yeah, hi. Lots of interesting points raised and lots of important conversation happening. I've got a couple of reactive statements or questions regarding some of the things that were said. One of them, when we were talking earlier about better transit access, I'm thinking, I live in Deep Cove, I'm thinking Quarry Rock. I don't want better transit access. I want less people on Quarry Rock because somebody's going to fall off. It gets too crowded up there. So in your transportation thinking, it would be helpful if you also thought of if there was some effort at redirecting people, acknowledging other places that people can go. I don't know that we can, I mean, in a land of freedom, you can't exactly say, no, you can't come here. But if they were more aware of other options, like I think of, I travel around in the wilderness of North Shore quite a bit, and there's a lot of places that are relatively untouched. They're not on social media, so people don't know about them. So a little bit more redirecting of people away from the hot spots, let's call them the hot spots. That's one point. Very important thing when you're talking about affordability, the measure of affordability. There has been recently in the news about if you're measuring affordable based on what existing rental is and you're in an area of all new stuff, it's not affordable. It's not affordable for somebody who works at Starbucks. So make sure that I'd like to see some effort at affordability matching actually the pay scale of the people that currently live in the neighborhood. Densification, yes, and there was actually some words in the staff report about densification and not and densification and not getting rid of existing non-market. Non-market is not the only affordable housing. Existing housing is existing 3-story walk-ups are affordable housing. I'd like to see more effort made to making it possible to hang on to that kind of housing. Secondary suites, all that kind of stuff that allows for gentle densification as opposed to sudden change. When you're talking about transit-oriented development, I listened to a presentation and they were saying that in Metro Vancouver, the transit-oriented development, the development around the transit corridors, the people who use transit don't live there because they can't afford to live there. The people who use transit live 3 blocks away because that's where the more affordable housing is. And so it's not really meeting the needs it's not meeting the intent of transit-oriented development. Thanks very much for your time. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Catherine Fagerlund. So I know that in some of the councils, you were up and down as a part of a regular meeting of council. We cleared the whole night for you. I see some of the demand from council waning, but we'll try to release you here at some point. But right now, at this point, I have councillors Back and Forbes lined up to speak. So, Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much to all of you who presented tonight, both Metro 2050 and Transport 2050. Really good information, and I appreciate the update. I just wondered if either maybe yourself, Ms. McNally, it's nice to see you again, or Ms. Cooper could comment on the COVID impacts of both of these plans, and if we've looked through the COVID lens and what changes or impacts they may have on either of the plans.
Thank you. I can start, and thank you for the question and through your worship. We've looked at it in a number of different ways. The first thing that we were asked to do is what would the impact of COVID have on population projections? And so we started to do some scenario work based on length of recovery, changes to immigration rates, all of that sort of thing. And we found that there would be pretty minimal long-term impact on population growth. This is still a really great place to live, and the demand is strong to come. But we also took a look at, and we are starting to take a look at what the impacts are on housing markets, on where people choose to live, how they're choosing to move around the region. And all we're doing at this point is we're monitoring trends, and we've been reporting out to a COVID task force at Metro and now the Mayor's Committee. But we're continuing to do that long-term research and work as well to see if it'll mean any changes to policy.
That's great. Thank you. And yeah, same question on the TransLink front. Kind of what the COVID lens has sort of done to the plan, or if any changes are going to come as a result of ridership, as we know, which is still coming. We're still recovering across the system.
Yes, thank you for that question. So because it is a long range strategy, we looked at a variety of potential stressors and things that could affect the region and the system in the future. COVID, it was definitely an acute stressor, but we've actually seen that it accelerated a few trends that are beneficial to the region. And I think I touched a little bit on that around the walking and cycling improvements and some of the reallocation of road space that we have seen to facilitate that. So that's a positive trend that we'd like to try to build on. Transit ridership did go down, you're right, but one of the benefits of what we've seen through COVID is more remote work, which was also a trend that was kind of happening. It just hadn't quite made it past, but it's actually, yes, it's hard on the revenues, but it's actually can be beneficial for infrastructure management and future investments, because if more people are able to work remotely, we don't need to spend as much potentially on more infrastructure because we actually build to peak capacities. And we tend to only have those peaks in the morning and in the afternoon with the commute. So maybe we can look in the future at balancing out the needs across the region. Obviously, not everyone can work remotely, but let's make space and efficiency for the people who do need to travel. So I would say there are definitely some challenges that we're still working through, but I would say that it has helped us in our in moving forward on some of the trends that could be beneficial.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report. I'm sure that we're going to have a lot more comments before you quit taking comments and you do your review. I've kind of scribbled a whole bunch of things all over my piece of paper here, so I'll try to put it together in a little bit of a coherent pattern, I hope. I'm going to go back to just talking about the district because you've come to present to us. So I'm concerned that the municipalities are not all being treated as individual municipalities with their own set of circumstances and their own requirements and their own stage infrastructure that they're at. North Vancouver, for instance, is not built on a grid like Vancouver. So that makes it more difficult for North Vancouver. We've got the mountain above us and the sea below us, and we're kind of hemmed in here. And we don't have a grid. The city of North Van is the closest you can get to some kind of a grid pattern, but definitely not in the district. And the other thing with the district is we have people that need to be in Horseshoe Bay, or we have people that are in Deep Cove, or even, I won't say farther, but, and we don't have sufficient bus services to them now, and we haven't for years. And yet the North Shore contributes to TransLink budget that you're looking at next month, and Metro, and we haven't gotten anything to improve that spread, that sprawl that we have. So consequently, transportation is not convenient, not reliable, and very hard to access. And I don't just mean access by healthy people, I mean access by people that are disabled, or in some way they use a cane, or in some way it's a little bit more difficult for them to go 6 blocks to try and get to a bus stop. So that really concerns me, that we may seem like a small municipality when it comes to representatives or voting for certain things or expressing opinions. We're small compared to Surrey and Vancouver. You put Surrey and Vancouver together, and what the North Shore wants seems to get drowned out. And I'm being totally blunt here about this, so don't get offended by it, but I'm just being blunt. We get forgotten. The other thing is transportation and housing go together. And after you get through transportation, whether people use it, how they use it, or what they use, then it's affordability for housing. Then it goes to what kind of jobs can we offer? Then it goes to our small businesses. Can they survive? Because can they afford to pay, for lack of a better term, service workers that they may need in their business? Can they afford to pay them a wage that allows them to get transportation here because they can't afford to live here? And if they can't, then do they survive as a business? So that goes down to the employees. So it's all tied together. And earlier in this evening, there was a comment made about not being too concerned about the North Shore, but being concerned about getting the transportation to get people to the North Shore. Well, we don't really want any more people until we have a better infrastructure that moves around. I live just approximately a block and a half off the highway, north of the Highway 1 in Lynn Valley. And if I want to go down to Canadian Tire on Marine Drive, I can't get there unless I leave before 1:30 in the afternoon. And even then, I'm sometimes stuck in a lineup. So I can't even go north-south, never mind catching anything to get over town or catching anything to get off of the North Shore. So we have a problem right here in the North Shore. And we need, I appreciate the rapid bus on Marine Drive. And I hope that it's helping. I haven't seen anything on that, but it's not at the moment doing an awful lot for the north-south type of thing. So I just wanted to say that. And then falling out from all of the transportation, housing, jobs, the businesses, the employees, then we get to mental health, because mental health is affected by all of those things. We keep thinking that, oh, we'll get rid of the single family house. But in COVID, the single family house was the one thing that I think anybody who didn't have one would have liked to have had the backyard. And that cuts down then on people driving to destination outdoor parks, because they don't necessarily have to go there. They've got a sort of green space there. Protecting our canopy is another way of sort of having nature still close to where you live without having to go out and find nature. So I think the densification, sometimes I personally could not live in 250 square feet. I guess if I was in jail, I'd have to, but I find that extremely small, and that's definitely going to take a toll on somebody's mental health, whether they realize it or not. And the peak capacity, someone made a comment about peak capacity is usually in the AM and the PM. Well, peak capacity on the North Shore is almost all day, depending on where you're trying to go. Like I said, gave you my example with Canadian Tire. Also, it can be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and from the exchange, Mountain Highway Exchange at Highway 1, traffic is backed up almost to Lynn Valley Center. So that the motors are running, you know, all the fumes, all the pollution. So if you don't get efficiency in your transportation system, you're never going to improve the atmosphere, the air quality. And then the other thing, I'm just kind of putting these things out there. We're trying to also protect our industrial lands, but we're getting severe pressure to develop those into housing. But we need to protect those industrial lands and our port lands, because that's part of a big chunk of our economy. And our job force currently anyway. I mean, that may change down the road, but we're getting tremendous pressure about that. And that the consequence of that is that affordable housing isn't affordable. And I always say affordable housing tied to income, because I think that's the only way you can make it affordable, is make sure you tie it to some measure. I guess the one other thing, where did I write it? Just about cars. We keep talking about the active transportation, and I have no problem with that. Active transportation is great. But my question is, if we're trying to accomplish these more compact, densified centers, and we're trying to get people out of gasoline cars for pollution and health, so then we're going to decide that we maybe don't need to build as much infrastructure. The gasoline cars are being replaced right now by electric cars, and they still need a road to drive on. And those electric cars will eventually be placed by the auto drive cars, and they will still need a road to drive on. So I'm concerned at the pace that we're doing the active transportation, some of the active transportation, the pace that we're doing it. And I understand why, for climate reasons, but I'm concerned about people having gone out and spent money for electric cars or auto drive cars and finding the commute even more difficult, or the getting to the appointment, or the getting their kids around will be even more difficult as we crowd the roadways. And right now in North Vancouver anyway, a lot of our roads weren't ever built with even a sidewalk. And usually in the district, it's a sidewalk on one side, not both, if you do have a sidewalk. And if you try to widen the sidewalks so the pedestrian can be safe, and then you try to add in a bike lane, and then you try to add in a divider to make it safer for the bicyclists, and then you've got construction vehicles, very large construction, 2 tandem trucks moving around in the district. Our roads can't our roads just can't handle that much. We can't. We weren't originally built to be able to handle that kind of thing, and we can't spread out, because a lot of it is we'd have to be buying the land off homeowners ourselves in order to be able to spread our roads out. It just doesn't seem efficient to me, and I'm just concerned about all of those things that I just mentioned. So I hope that when you're looking at your plans, that you take into account the individuality of each municipality. And we really need, I'd love to have a SkyTrain over here, something that could move us faster and people could get on and it was easier to get to. So that's just my comments. I just think, we're impacted everywhere. Our businesses, our housing affordability, everything is impacted, our mental health. And I wish that other communities, other municipalities would do more about developing their own nature park, so that there was a little bit less stress, because also we have to clean up. We get 18,000 more people here. We have to clean that up. Our forests are suffering a little bit from some of that extra traffic. That's only natural. But then we have to deal with it within our budget to be able to repair or whatever we need to do to accommodate the people who come here. So it's very difficult, and we're a smaller municipality and we don't have a tax base like the city. So those are my concerns.
I don't know if you can hear me, but we do, we're over 10 minutes, and I know I didn't expressly put a time limit on it, but I've got to get to some other hands. And thank you. Councillor Kern, second time speaking.
Thanks. I just had a question on the how decisions are made with the province. This is something I brought up at UBCM, and I didn't get an answer to it, but infrastructure investments in terms of highway expansion, et cetera, in a climate emergency that are happening that are not under Metro Vancouver's purview necessarily, but obviously influence the how we move in the region. So how does that work? And specifically, I'm wondering if Metro Vancouver applies I know that you have your climate policy, as do we. We sort of look at climate as a lens through which all policies are viewed, not that you have a climate policy. It's like we have a climate emergency and every policy is an opportunity to improve lives in different ways. So in terms of making decisions, federal infrastructure investments over $10 million require a climate lens, but to actually say, how is this reducing emissions? And I feel like sometimes the decisions that we make as a region are actually have been challenged by people saying this actually isn't reducing emissions, or if we're looking at embodied emissions, of course, you're looking at what it takes to build all of this. So, so the two questions, I guess, would be, what's the relationship between the province in terms of how they do bridges and roads and Metro? And then does Metro Vancouver actually look at every decision through a climate lens? And if so, how is it being measured? Are you actually looking at GHGs for each decision?
So, I mean, first, in terms of working with the province, historically, there has been a bit of a disconnect between provincial highway infrastructure upgrading and some of the regional planning and the TransLink work. And so you can see over time that there have been some inconsistencies. I think there's a commitment from all three bodies to work much more closely together. And so now we have a forum where we have chair of Metro, chair of the Mayor's Council from TransLink, and the provincial minister meeting regularly to talk about how provincial transportation planning, not just in the metro area, but also with the adjacent Fraser Valley and also the Sea to Sky corridor, how that can be done in a consistent way. So it's better than it has been, and we're committed to making it better yet, maybe is my answer. You know, you mentioned federal, and I think they generally go through the province in terms of their infrastructure and when they're looking at how they contribute. Yes, we do look at things through the climate lens, as you're saying, and there's much more to come on that now as we have action plans within our climate 2050 strategy, because I said earlier, we have to do much more and we have to do it much faster than what we've been doing historically in order to meet the goals and targets that we have to meet going forward. And so we're looking at all different industry sectors and what approach we're going to have to take. And as Heather mentioned, also extending that to work with the municipalities. There was a comment earlier, I think Mayor Little, about the teeth in the plan, and I do go back to we're a federation, it's a collaboration, and so you know, we sometimes do get heat at the Metro table to say that it's not our role to dictate, and it's true. Local government, the municipalities do have control over you know, the local zoning issues, and so so the key is at the regional table that we do work collaboratively as a federation and make sure that all of your individual OCPs knit together into a much stronger tapestry for the region.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. It's been a really good discussion, but I hearken back to your comments, Mayor Little, you know, where are the teeth in the plan? And obviously, Mr. Dubrovoni's comments in regards to the senior levels of government working more closely together to try to knit all these plans together and truly, you know, create a region that is sustainable and healthy and environmentally responsible, while providing, you know, the necessities for those that live here and those that want to live here. You know, when I was first elected in '96, it was called the Livable Region Plan, and now it's called the Regional Growth Plan or the Regional Growth Strategy. And I think a lot of people over the last 10 years has thought to themselves, and I'll say our community has said this. I won't speak for others because, you know, maybe that's anecdotal. I have family and friends living in other municipalities, and it is challenging for them as well. But our community has become more expensive, more congested, not livable as it once was. And, you know, that's really the sell to the electorate, to the taxpayers, to those that are voting in, you know, elections, that are electing representatives to make decisions. You know, one government can say, we're going to build roads and bridges everywhere because we want to be able to open opportunities. You know, other municipalities and other elected officials will say, you know, the opposite. We're not going to do that. And that's where the fact that this document is not regulatory is very challenging, because we can only give the best advice we can give based on the data that we have, based on the science, based on, you know, the information around North America and the world, on best practices, and present it to those elected officials and hope that they implement accordingly. But the taxpayer also has a voice. And there was a house that just sold recently, actually today in my house, or in my neighborhood, that went over $500,000 over asking. You know, 10 years ago, that house was under $1 million, well under $1 million. 5 years ago, it was maybe just over $1 million. Now it's sold for nearly $2.5 million. And, you know, we ask ourselves, like, when does the ceiling crack? We know that development is you know, 20% of the GDP in Canada. Natural resources are no longer, you know, fueling our economy, and development is to a great extent. And, you know, one has to ask the question, who's demanding all this development? Are we building housing for people who are going to be, you know, those workers on those tugboats, in those factories, you know, driving those buses, working in the hospitals, our first responders? Are we building housing for them, or are we building housing for investment? And, you know, that's been a debate that's been going on for some time, and I'm sure will continue into the future. Vancouver is a very expensive city to live in. I mean, we know that we're in the top 5 in the world of expensive cities. And, you know, we have to be able to deal with that. On the North Shore, we think of ourselves as an island, and I think about, you know, if we did have SkyTrain, if we did have rapid transit to the North Shore, would that all miraculously just make all the cars go away? Would the people that are building the houses, the plumbers and the electricians, would they get on rapid transit to come over here and build? You know, those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Right now, Vancouver Island is the place to go. You know, it used to be the west side, sell on the west side, move to the North Shore, move back to where you grew up. Now it's leave the North Shore and let's go to the island. That's the trend. We're a thoroughfare for everybody that wants to go to the island and to the sea to sky, and both of those areas are developing. You know, they have their capacity limits too. They have their issues. But, you know, Port Alberni, as an example, is looking at a significant development plan, you know, because there's investment. Indian Arm, which is a boat access only area, houses are like flying out of there, because why not? Why not just build a really nice house and have a really nice boat and commute into Vancouver? Problem is there's no marinas, but they don't know that yet. Nowhere to dock your boat. They'll find that out pretty quickly. But, you know, our city and our region, it's a huge place to invest from people around the world. And we really need to, you know, manage that. It's a challenge that I don't know that we're going to look back on and say, you know, that was a good move. I think it's something that we're going to regret in the future if we don't continue to manage foreign investment and what is being sold in the region. 40 years ago, Hawaii, the state of Hawaii just said, sorry, Canadians, you can't keep buying land or condos in our community. And they put significant restrictions, snowbirds going down into Phoenix and Nevada. You know, same thing. We were buying up the land then, and now it's our turn. And it's challenging when people that have grown up here are being pushed out. And when property values are skyrocketing, assessments on land values are going up so high that, you know, in a small area, but it's affecting the value of the entire municipality. I remember, Ms. McNeil, during a planning session, you talked about, we had a really good discussion on when we built SkyTrain stations and we look at developing in those SkyTrain stations in town centers, you know, the value of land rises. And, you know, there's an equation as to how much density you need to put in there in order for it to be affordable. And that concept still exists. It's not going away. We've built more in the last 10 years in this region, or since 1986, than we did probably as much in the turn of the century. And it hasn't gotten cheaper, it's more expensive. So that's the sell to the community. How is all of this going to benefit those of us that live here right now? I understand we need to plan for the future, but right now I work for those taxpayers that are here, and we're still in lines. It's still expensive, and our problems are not getting easier, they're getting harder. So I know that Metro does good work on this. I know you don't have the answers to all of these questions. I wish you did. And I know that we as local governments in the province and the federal government, working more closely than we ever have in the past, we will endeavor to you know, deal with these issues to the best of our abilities. But like climate change, some things are just unfortunately out of our control, without some teeth, as the mayor has pointed out, and that's a big concern. But thank you for your work and your commitment to the region, and thanks for living on the North Shore. You experience what we experience all the time, and it's good to have the head of planning from Metro understanding you know, some of our challenges, because they're not easy fixes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miri. So this is the beginning of a conversation. We obviously have several other opportunities for people to provide feedback on these reports, and with about a 5-month schedule for full ratification of these projects, there will be opportunities both for the members of the public and for members of the elected officials in the community to be able to provide more feedback. But I think you're starting to hear the challenges that we're facing on the North Shore and the tension that we have between development and transportation situation, the very real challenges that we're facing today, but also the limited mechanisms we have in place to address the problems of tomorrow without regional intervention. And so I do appreciate you taking the time to come and join us and share the regional plan with us. We'll give even more feedback as the project goes along, but just want you to know that these are all issues that deeply affect every resident of the District of North Vancouver on a daily basis. That transportation piece is it causes people to completely alter their life. You know, where you used to be able to take your kid to that pool to go and have some swimming lessons, but oh, sorry, not any time between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock because it's completely shut down. Or you wanted to go over to that park that is in your neighborhood. To you, it's a local park, but to the tens of thousands of people that are looking for recreation, it's a free regional activity, and so you can't enjoy your local park anymore. And that relationship with our merchants as well, where when some of the spaces get so busy that the locals stop going, well, then in the shoulder season when it rains, they don't have a relationship with that merchant anymore to help them through the tough times. So it becomes a boom and bust, a feast and famine sort of cycle for a lot of our businesses because of the behavior of the regional traffic. So These are all very real daily issues for us on the North Shore. I do appreciate the effort that you're making to address them. And you're going to hear from us on an ongoing basis from here through this process, because it's something very near and dear to us. But I'm going to wrap things up there. I don't know, Mr. Dobrevony, if you have any closing comments from your side. And then I'll also go to Caitlin after. But.
Well, thank you. I'll keep it short. I do appreciate the discussion. It was a good discussion, and I hear the frustration, and you know, I didn't want to sort of get into a back and forth to try to respond to everything. But in terms of the regional parks, just to let you know, we are looking at technology and how do we provide, you know, better alerts so people know that parking lots are full at 9:30 in the morning, and yet you might, you know, a dozen other parks in the region still are empty. And so how do we better manage, you know, parking and traffic through across the region so people have better information to make better decisions. And the affordability, we're hearing that loudly and clearly. I do want to finish on a little bit of an up note. I mean, I think as Heather mentioned, you know, these plans have been updated continually over the decades. And one of the things we got wrong, you know, was around transit-oriented development, was that sure, there was density, but the prices just skyrocketed. And so that is something that we're looking to improve in this version, where we're looking at having a minimum of at least 15% affordable housing in developments that are in areas that are well served by transit. You know, along the frequent transit and the high transit network. So we're not there. There's still lots of challenges. We heard you clearly, but I do want to, you know, touch on the things that we are doing to make it better, and we'll keep working at it. We'll keep taking away the concerns that you have, and we'll keep working to see how we can improve it as we go. But thank you very much, and we're happy to come back again for a public forum and any other discussions that you want to have.
We'll have you back for a longer meeting in future when we have more time, you know. Caitlin Cooper from TransLink, any closing comments this evening?
Thanks again for having me. I think all of the issues that were raised tonight are known issues to many of us, especially at TransLink. And I'm hoping that when you see the draft strategy in October, that you'll see some of those the things that you raised addressed, but I do know that we need to work together going into the future to try to address these challenges together. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So first I want to express my appreciation to the members of public that joined us here this evening, both in person and virtually. I also wanted to do a special note of appreciation to our IT staff, our clerks, and Medi in the back, all of the people that contributed to make the technology work today as we transition into blended meetings. We wanted to, I'd say it ran fairly clearly. We'll have to adjust some of the volumes here and there, but this is what meetings are going to look like here at the District of North Vancouver for the foreseeable future, is this blend of in-person and virtual, just to keep people safe, but also give people an opportunity to participate wherever they may be. So again, thank you, Council, for your participation. Thank you to our guests. Everybody have a fantastic evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.